Hey everyone, Lisa Ann Samara Jones today from Hidden Views. I've been scrolling on my Facebook lately. I've got a few channels that I really like, and then other times I let the algorithm figure out what I'm going to watch, and I'll scroll through just to see is there anything good. And something that I've been noticing lately is that there are a lot of videos about end times coming up. They're titled Rapture Dreams, or Are We in the End Times, or Shocking, Wait till you see this. And I've looked at some of them, but mostly as I've looked at them, I just kind of either scroll past or turn them off a few minutes in. But I thought that maybe it was a good time to start talking about the end times here at Hidden Views. Let's go ahead and first start off with, are we nearing the end times and the signs that the Bible gives us? So the first verse that I want to look at comes from Matthew chapter 24, verse 34. This one is quoted regularly. It's Jesus said, "But concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels or heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only." So some people will say because of that verse, we don't need to put any effort into trying to figure out whether we're in the end times or not. But if you look before that in verse 3, we can see that while Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. They said, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" And that's in verse 3, chapter 24 of Matthew. So Jesus answers them. He didn't tell them, "Look, no one knows the hour or the day, so I can't answer you." In fact, he took the opportunity to detail the events and the types of things that are going to happen as the signs preceding his second coming. And he does this to warn them and us as the readers of these scriptures. So Jesus answers in verse 4. He says, "See to it that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. These things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginnings of the birth pains." So Jesus gave us signs to watch for. What's more, he told us, "Therefore, keep watch, because you don't know the day in which the Lord will return." And that's from Matthew 24:42. So when he told us that he doesn't even know the day or the hour, he wasn't saying, "Don't watch," because only a few verses later, from the time that he said no one knows the time, the day, or the hour, he said, "Keep watch because you don't know the time or the hour." In fact, he gives a parable later on that's recorded in both Matthew and Mark that talks about people who say, he hasn't come back yet, and they start to change the way that they're doing things. And we'll look at that later. So before we get any further in this, I wanted to let you know that this is going to be multiple videos. It's going to be an entire series on end times. There's so many topics to talk about, so many verses to use, and we can kind of put this into subtopics and have little talks. So I hope that you'll follow along. This is the first one. Hit that subscribe. Press the bell so that you can see when more videos are coming on, and leave a comment. Talk to me through this. If there are some verses that you'd like to hear spoken about, or topics on the end times that you want to discuss, just type those in on the comments and I will be glad to look at those, and we can definitely talk about those. So let's get back to these signs. We've just listed some of the signs that Christ has told us are going to be the birth pains. So many are going to be coming in his name, claiming to be Christ. And there have been lots of people throughout history, long before we were ever here, who have come in the name of Christ, saying they are Christ and that we need to follow them. A few years ago, I saw there was someone in Australia saying that they were the Christ. There was Waco, Texas. There's so many times that we can look and see people who were saying, "Hey, I'm the Christ." But there was never a huge following. It was always a small subsect of people who followed, and the rest of the world didn't follow. So while there were some people that really should have looked at this verse at those times, there were few people that we're really actually following those people. However, this is going to be a sign. So the more that we see this happening, or the more people we see following someone who's calling themselves the Christ, the more we can look and see this is a sign that Christ gave us, and not to be deceived. Another thing he told us is that we are going to hear about wars and rumors of wars. And, anyone who's ever been through school and learned about history knows that there's very few years that we've not been in war somewhere in the world. Everybody knows that Ukraine and Russia have a war going on right now, and nobody really knows how that's going to end up turning out. So while that's been going on, it is a sign that he gave us, but it's something that's been happening as well. It says nation will rise against nation. We have NATO, and we've got different alliances. We've got nations that can't stand us. When we've had certain presidents, we've had other nations that can't stand us, and other nations that fight with each other and war with each other, and there's guerrilla wars and civil wars. So nations rising against nations is also something that has just been going on for a very long time. So these signs are harder for us to look at and really say, yes, definitely the end is near. Except that we could say that the end has been near since Christ rose from the dead. We just don't know relatively how near. And obviously, as each day goes by, we get ourselves a little bit closer. Something else he said was kingdom against kingdom. Now, since he said nation against nation, I kind of look at kingdom against kingdom as, is that the same thing? Or does he mean spiritual kingdom against spiritual kingdom? And if that's the case, a lot of us don't really have those spiritual eyes on to see the spiritual warfare that's going on around us. We may be able to sense it. We may see things that are going on in the world and really think, wow, the dark is definitely fighting against the light. But again, these are a little bit ambiguous when it comes to signs. There's going to be famines, and there's going to be earthquakes. I saw in the news yesterday that the Northern California had an earthquake. I see multiple earthquakes around the world that are happening. Of course, we have the Ring of Fire and earthquakes that tend to be in those areas where the plates are shifting and there's volcanic action going on, which are all associated with earthquakes. Famine, definitely, those of us who have television, we can watch the commercials of the poor nations where the children are starving, and we send money in for them to be able to have food. We know that there's natural disasters that have happened, and a lot of times there's more commercials or more news stories showing us so that we can send relief to them. I do think that we are on the verge of famine given what's going on in our world right now. When COVID hit in 2020, and then we started to really see empty shelves, bare shelves throughout the country. Just going grocery shopping, we can see that the prices are going up. The Mississippi River is low right now. There are articles and news stories about how that is a major hub that delivers grains and the various different things that are grown through the heart of America. And there's not sufficient storage in some of the places, like down here further in the South. And they are supposed to be able to send their goods up north to be stored in containers that are made and are in cooler climates so that it's easier and they'll store longer. So there's definitely that issue going on. With the war in Ukraine and Russia, they are a large grain exporter. They're also a fertilizer exporter. So there's been a lot of price hikes in animal feed. We're a homestead up here, and we see that in the prices of animal feed as well as our own food in the grocery stores. And I'm not sure that I see around the world with the different rivers that are drying up and the different lakes that are starting to dry up, where people are like Lake Mead, where that's a huge water reservoir for the West. I do think that it's possible that worldwide we are coming into something that's going to be more of a famine, something along the lines of the Great Depression. So I do know that Jesus has also told us during this time not to be alarmed that these things have to happen. So I keep that in my mind as my family and I are living here and making sure we keep our animals safe and our kids well fed and all of those things. it's definitely something that we're thinking about as we see what's going on in the world. Is that a sign that the end's coming? Maybe, maybe not. I tend to lean more towards the idea that these are the beginning of birth pains, like Jesus said. I have a few other ideas kind of running through my mind that would lead me to think that we are definitely coming upon the end. We will get into those in some other videos so that you'll see more of those details. I don't want to dump too much on you per video. But there's also more signs that were given in the New Testament about what is going to happen in the end times. And I want everyone to flip to 1 Timothy chapter 3 and look at verses 1 through 5. I'm going to read that for you, and then I've kind of listed about 25 signs that we've been given so far. But understand this: in the last days, terrible times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderous, without self control, brutal, without love of good, traitorous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Turn away from such as these. So we're going to have terrible times. People will be lovers of themselves. And really, if you do a Google search, you can see that narcissism has been on the rise for at least the last 2 decades. And narcissism is really people who love themselves. And some of these other things like boastful, arrogant, abusive, it says people will be lovers of money. And come on, we can see that very easily, that people are lovers of money. Huge decisions for our country, for our world, is made based on financial gain for someone. There is definitely a lot of greed going on. Some of the other things on the list are disobedient to parents. And I'm a teacher. I've been a teacher for longer than I want to tell you, over 20 years. And definitely there has been a shift in kids. There is so much disobedience, and I've taught in public schools as well as private schools, private Christian schools even, and I'm usually just taken aback when I see, even in these Christian families, these children who are completely disobedient to their parents and self-centered, and they want everything that they want and are very rude to their parents. So definitely, even in Christian circles where we would have thought more along the lines that we would see a better behavior coming from Christian children, but definitely seeing the disobedience, ungratefulness, definitely see a lot of that. Although I do see memes run through social media talking about making sure that you plant yourself where you are and be grateful where you are. So there's somebody out there who's trying to say, be grateful, be happy with what you have. But I think that they're out there because we're seeing that the predominant set of people are ungrateful. They're unhappy with what they have. They want something more. They want to keep up with the Joneses. They see somebody else having something and they want it. The grass is greener on the other side, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to get to that grass, even if it puts them into debt up to their eyeballs. We see people who are unholy. There is a whole denomination of these hyper grace believers who don't think that being holy has anything to do with being set apart or living any kind of righteous life. They think they said, I believe, they walked down the aisle, maybe they were baptized, and that's good. They can continue to be human because God knows we're human, and that's the way we're supposed to be. And I would put those people in the unholy category. There are plenty of other people who go to churches that are not necessarily the hyper grace, and it is the same thing where they go in on Sunday and they pretend to be one way so that everyone can see what they're like in front of them, but that's not the real them, and they go out during the week and they are living unholy lives. I definitely see a rise of that. Unloving, unforgiving, slanderous. I mean, that's one of the things people talk about all the time when they're on YouTube and in social media, that nowadays people have no problem with slandering. You're going to get ugly comments. You're going to have arguments, people just arguing for the sake of arguing and slandering you. There's lack of self-control. I definitely see that. Brutal without love of good. It just seems like open your eyes and look outside, go shopping, Black Friday, with what goes on, the trampling and the stampeding to go get the sales that don't even seem to be amazingly wonderful. Lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. Yeah, when we're arguing that we don't need to follow what the Bible says, we don't need to be righteous, that we can just be human, we should put ourselves first, just do you. Um, those are all lovers of pleasure over lovers of God. And having a form of godliness but denying its power. There's a lot of people who go to church regularly, maybe watch sermons on YouTube or on television. They're watching, they maybe have their Bible open and they're reading the words on the page, but they do not have the power, which is translated to dunamis, which we've talked about in other videos, is the supernatural power from God that we get as believers. So there's a form of godliness. I can pretend to do the things that are supposed to look good, but they are lacking the power. And I definitely see that. When I was much younger, about 20 years old, I was attending a church where one of the younger youth attendees told us that for years he'd been pretending. Everyone thought that he was saved, had been baptized, was one of those great believers, and he openly said, "No, I'm not. I know what I'm supposed to do to look like I'm a good believer, and I'm not." And unfortunately, pastors of that church took him aside and told him, "Oh no, you're just slightly confused. You're still saved. Carry on," and pat him on the head. So he's probably still gone on with his form of godliness, but lacking the power. So back in Matthew 24, we saw that there's going to be many coming in his name claiming to be Christ. We're going to hear of wars and rumors of wars. Nations will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines and earthquakes. So I personally think that we are nearing the end times. Like I said, I will give you more details in more videos to give you further reasons why I think we are. But just looking at these in this set of signs, I do think that there would be an argument to say that we are nearer to the end times than we ever have been before, obviously, but getting very close. So if you are interested in learning more about end times and looking at the Bible verses and the scriptures that support what is supposed to happen in the end times, we will go through all of that. We will go through the details of what's going to happen in the end times and what's going to happen to believers and all of those things. Please definitely hit that bell and subscribe so that you can hear more videos. I would love to hear your questions. Don't forget to put them in the comments if you've got anything that you'd like to say, or obviously not slanderously, but if you've got something that you see differently, please feel free to put it in the comments, and I would love to have a discussion with you about that. I will see you again soon with the next video on the next topic in end times, and I hope you have a great day.